Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. This is Airwindows TapeHack. Now maybe that didn't make as much of an impression. That's not very extreme. So I tell you what, that's full wet, but we're not driving as hard as maybe we could, and I'm backing the output level down. So what if we do this? After all, if this is a normal, not distorted, and this is our distortion, what happens if we go farther? Now what do you think? But wait, there's more. Let's shift some bits and add 6 dB. No, let's add 12 dB. 18. 24. 600 million. Again, Airwindows TapeHack. So where this comes from, there's a guy named Spencer in Walters Audio who is putting out new hardware. He's developed a thing called the tape element. I am entirely in favor of this. My aspiration is I will eventually buy some of those so that I can record through them, because as near as I can tell, he's nailed it. He's building hardware. I'm not. I'm building software. And because I'm building software, I can make things be more than a little bit simpler than that. I decided to try to work out the most general of principles of what's going on in this Walters Audio work. I think it was originally called Secret Tape. Well, this is not a secret because my code is open source code. And turns out you can take a generalization of sign processing, the kind of thing that you might do if you were applying a transfer function to the sound, making it fatter, using, for instance, running the signal through just sine. And I've been doing that for many years, like in density and stuff. And I've also done some experiments with what I could call degenerate versions of that, namely console 0 is a simplified sine function and a simplified arcsine function. And that worked pretty good. It was a form of saturation function that ran with some of the ideas in console 0. But at that time, I had not thought of trying to use this sine function stuff to apply the discontinuity to the sound that nobody pays attention to. You see, everybody knows that if you overdrive tape, it saturates. We've been doing that for years, decades. It took Spencer there with this new hardware to look into what happens when you are finding something that reacts like tape and applying a bias frequency to it. Why do we apply a bias frequency? We apply a bias frequency because if you just record without any bias onto tape, there's this section in the middle that will not record properly. It'll kind of drop out. You can't get it to react until you're putting enough magnetic flux into it. And this is the case for all tape. But I've rarely seen anybody pay attention to what that implies as far as the other end of the dynamic spectrum. We all know that tape does soft saturation when things get loud. But back in the day, and in particular, the era, which I am likewise very fond of, that Spencer's paid a special attention to, like the mid-70s, when people were working more on dynamic range and low noise than they were on smashing everything and making it sound really distorted. Back in the day, you got really high peak energy relative to RMS because people were not distorting things. But here's the deal. If you are recording quietly onto tape, this other form of distortion the way that the coercivity doesn't kick in unless you have a bias function causing it to be activated. That's another nonlinearity, and I've not seen people pay attention to it. That's what TapeHack is. TapeHack is about taking the quiet section of the sound as you cross through 0 and just putting that type of... What ends up happening is as you go increasingly loud, the cross-through section doesn't continue to get steep at the same rate that it would if you were just doing a pure distortion function. Instead, this little nonlinearity is actually flattening stuff out. That has the result of bigger peak energy relative to RMS, and it's leaning things out in a way that's very useful. It brings depth. It brings us faintly gatey-like behavior. I'm not sure if I'd call it that. And this is controllable. And I'm going to show you a couple of other things that TapeHack can do other than just this. For instance, let's play with the Rhodes. This is a real live Fender Rhodes. So what happens when we distort this a lot? Well, you can make it be quite distorted indeed. And this may well sound kind of like what hitting tape too hard with a Rhodes is like. But remember, it's not all about just slam. So if you take the input and put it, it's similar to my Z series filter plugins in that this input control, 0.1 is unity gain going in, and then it is a slight soft saturation function. So 0.1 is where you start with regard to anything like overdrive. And then this output control, I'm dialing it way back because I was comparing between dry signal and wet signal. You wouldn't believe the amount of gain you can get out of this. You can hit this tape real hard and have it still sound like it's not clipping. This is the kind of thing that they call tape compression. And this simple algorithm does a very good job of doing it. By the way, there will be an update for the plugin 2 tape that simply drops this in as the new distortion algorithm. That's coming. I'll do that. For now, you get this. Dry. And then let's build up the gain so that it's a comparable loudness. We can get this nice color on things because the color is not only dependent on saturating. The color is also just the sound of this transfer function. That was a bum note. And I can go between dry and wet. Again. Bring the volume up a little bit. Here's our dry. It's just like a digital recording. Here's the TapeHack difference. So the next question is, what happens when you put it on guitars? And I can show you that. I'm thinking I'm maybe going to loop it because this particular recording is not pleasant playing, but what do we care about that? Dry. We can go into full wet. And let's suppose you have output at 1, which is not actually unity gain on output because this algorithm actually peaks a little bit over 1. It's not really a sine. It's actually something else. But here's what we can do with their input gain. So dry. You can do this. And then even more if you want. I'm not going to take any more time demonstrating that. I think that speaks volumes. That was how much clean and confined gain you can get out of, say, a heavy guitar sound, simply running it through this one plugin, TapeHack, which is very simple and minimalist. It's cheaper than running a single sine. There are many plugins that do many more complicated things than this. This is one of those magic ones that there's next to nothing to it. So it is actually lower CPU than nearly anything. It's not even a very sophisticated sine. It's got relatively few additional things combined to it. The whole purpose is, one, produce that sine-like soft clip, but also make sure that the area near the center is getting expanded just the tiniest bit. And I'm really looking forward to working with this. This is similar to like when I came up with Spiral, which flattens out things a little bit. And the fact is, if I can do this, I could also use the same principle to do an arc sine, which means that it is a recipe for making a console version. And since I can design it, I can make it be a very accurate and clean match for having the console version be relatively undistorted all by itself. Or I can tailor it in this way to do things like do a version of console that's like way more old school. Spencer and Walters Audio took time to work out that 1950s tape acts differently from 1970s tape, which acts differently from 1990s tape, and is likely to be doing variations of all of those things. But the same principle means I can come up with a version of console using the same basic concept without I'm not using any of this stuff. This is an observation about what happens when you're keeping track of what happens to the center, like silence on tape, and you're only getting it to work because you're biasing it into responding. That does something to the transfer function, and now we know how. So this is going to be great fun, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.